disappoint you. No donuts in the potter's process. Maybe for a quick snack break. I don't know. So glazing is the other firing process. It gets put into a fire at about 1240 degrees Celsius. And the glaze is a substance that is put on the vessel, and it melts and puts a glossy look on the piece. And, sometimes you see pottery that is like kind of like a matte substance. Some potters put the glaze on and some potters just don't. That's fine. You get to do whatever you want to do. This is your process. So, the seventh, we just did the seventh step. Now we're talking about the eighth step. So the eighth step is the very last step. And in my personal opinion, this is the most important step of them all that needs to be done to complete the vessel. So the potter takes a pen or a marker or paint, whatever he can get his hands on, and he writes his name on the piece to let others know that that piece belongs to him. And I love how the potter's process is so similar to our potter's process. And sometimes the Lord begins to mold us and shape us, and he makes a plan for our life. And the Bible says in Jeremiah 1:5, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you." And even before we were even thought of by our parents, God had already started designing what our life was going to look like. And he was making plans of how he was going to form us and shape us. And the things in our life might not always look like what we always imagine them to look like. We make these plans, and sometimes they just don't turn out the way that we thought. And the Bible says in Proverbs that man plans his own way, but the Lord directs his steps. And this is something that I have learned over the years. And, I can make plans of what I want my life to look like. I can have big dreams for myself and plan all of these things out. But ultimately, I have already given my plans to the Lord. I've given my life. I've given all of my dreams to the Lord to be able to direct me and to lead me to be the person that he wants me to be. And one thing that I really like about this process, and one thing to notice, is that the vessel either sits on the shelf or is in the fire a lot of the time. And I think that we can all relate to that in our lives. We've either been set aside, maybe we feel like we've been forgotten about, or we're going through trials and situations, and we kind of go through the fire. We go through points in our life when we feel like we're just sitting in a waiting room, and we know that maybe God has promised us some things, and we know that God has spoken to us specifically about something, and God promised us revival, and we get excited, and we're ready to receive that word when the Lord speaks it. But we didn't realize that word came with just a little bit of waiting, which is hard. It's difficult, and it's hard to wait. I'll just say that waiting and being patient is not my strong suit. I don't like to wait. I'm a very, very impatient person. I don't like to wait. So if the Lord is speaking something to me, I'm like, yes, Jesus, I receive it right now. And he's like, that's great. I'm glad you want to follow my will, but you got to wait. So the waiting game is not easy. And I know that a lot of times it's almost seems like God just sits us on a shelf and he walks away from us. It can be months, it can be weeks, it can be years that God has promised us something, and we sit there and we wait, and we feel like we're not serving any kind of purpose at all. And we begin to collect dust, and we can't help but feel sorry for ourselves because it seems to be that we have been forgotten about. But if I can just encourage somebody in this moment, if you feel like you are in a stage right now where God seems so far away and that there's no hope for you, nothing is working, nothing seems to be fitting into place, there is hope for you. You're just sitting in the waiting room. But can I tell you that God is doing something so great in your life right now? That even when you can't see it, that the Lord works behind the scenes. He's working even when we don't understand it. He's working even when we can't see it. He's working even when we can't feel it. God is always working. And not just for a random purpose, but he's working for our good. He has planned and he has designed something for our life. And so, the Lord in his word has promised that he would never leave us, that he would never forsake us, because you are the potter's most wanted. He created you for a specific purpose. He created you, and you are his most wanted. He took the time to design you and to work on you and to orchestrate every single little detail in your life because he cares so greatly for you. And in our lives, we may end up with some nicks and some broken pieces, but can I tell you that the Lord loves our broken pieces? He is the one that comes up right behind us when we have been broken. He comes up right behind us and he picks up those pieces and he puts them back where they're meant to be. And no matter how bad it looks from our perspective, the Lord sees us as beautiful and he sees us as wanted because we are his most wanted. We are his and he cherishes us. What a love. For somebody to come behind you and pick up all of your broken pieces, all of the pieces of your life that you see as ugly and unwanted for yourself, the Lord comes behind you and he picks those pieces up because he loves you enough. What a love. This is a love that I want to live for. The God of all creation took the time to design me and to create me for a purpose, for a specific purpose. And we all go through situations and hardships in our lives, and sometimes it can feel compared to walking through the fire. We've all experienced that in our life. I know we have, because we're human, and this is life. Life is full of situations and hardships, and walking through the fire, and coming out of the fire, and then walking back in the fire, and out of the fire, and spending more time on the shelf. That's a part of life, and it's a part of God's process. It's hard, but it's part of God's process. And we should have enough trust in the Lord, the one who created everything, including us, to know that he has his hand on our life, that he is directing us and he is leading us to be exactly who we need to be for his purpose, for his kingdom. We all go through our ups and downs, but I can stand here today and tell you that I am a living witness that God makes a way every single time. Every single time. I don't care what the situation was that felt so hopeless. I can think of a couple situations right now in my head of very, very hopeless situations where I felt just nothing. You know what I mean? I felt absolutely nothing, but the Lord made a way, and the Lord restored that peace within me, and the Lord restored that joy within me. And I'm so thankful for it. And if I could go ahead and have the music come help me out. I'm closing very quickly because this is just what I feel like the Lord has. And I'm a very straight to the point type of person. So, Lord bless. I can stand here today and say that the Lord has always been faithful in my life. And I'm sure that some of you can stand and you can say that the Lord has been faithful in your life through certain situations. He's just awesome like that. He always has his hand on us. And when we go through all of this, the Lord makes all of the finishing touches and he trims us and he takes all the rough edges off. He takes all the sharp edges off, and we start to look like what he designed us to truly be. And the Lord, he does what any good potter would do, and he gives us a name. He gives us his name. He writes his name on us, and we belong to him. And no matter how many times in the beginning, us as clay, we mess up, we fall apart, we maybe broke on the potter's wheel, he starts over again, and he begins to knead us, and he begins to mold us and shape us, and he gives us a name. And sometimes we might go through the fire again. It's just part of the potter's process. Sometimes we might get put back on the shelf to spend more time waiting. It's part of the potter's process. But just to know that we are wanted by the potter, just to know that we are wanted by the creator of the universe. And he doesn't throw the clay away. When we mess up, when we have broken pieces, when we fall apart on the potter's wheel, he doesn't throw us away. Never. He doesn't throw us away, but he picks us up and he puts us back on that wheel. And he begins to mold us and shape us. He sees the potential in the clay and what it was meant to be in the first place. And he doesn't ever stop working on the clay. He is still molding us and he is shaping us today. And we as the people of God have to allow the Lord to make every detail of our life. If we will just give that to him, if we will allow the Lord to orchestrate every single detail of our life, how beautiful will our life really be? Because he has so much. If you could just see and if you could understand the absolute depth of what the Lord really wants for our lives. Because we are his most wanted. We are the potter's most wanted. I want to open up this altar tonight. And if you are willing tonight, give every detail to the Lord. Give all of that to the Lord because he wants it. He wants to make something so beautiful out of your life. So I want to open this altar up right now if you want to come. Give that to the Lord. Let him mold you and shape you tonight so he can do exactly in our lives what he needs to do so we can do what he is calling us to do. We can fulfill the purpose that he has designed and he has created us for. Give those details to the Lord.